Okay, welcome ladies and gents to this weekend stream. This will be the last stream of the week here. And we're going to take a break from the geopolitical today and the war and everything else. Even though there is a lot going on, there's even been more escalations overnight. But I've been wanting to make this video for the last 2 weeks to talk about what's happening in the UK with this mass exodus and the new taxes and everything else. So we're going to have to put all the geopolitical to the side so I can get this video done for you, because I think it's really important that you understand what's going on, especially as 30% of my subscriber base is based in the United Kingdom. So here we go then. Let's get right into everything. We've got lots of articles and news to go through. But in summary, what is taking place at the moment is Rachel Reeves, who's the Chancellor of the UK. We remember a while back this announcement that there won't be any new taxes and that Labour won't raise taxes on the people and that the people will be better off under Labour. Is that true? Well, on two counts, no, and let me explain why. Number one, they said they won't raise taxes like income taxes and things like that. The inflation did that already. So what would have happened under a fair system is, as inflation pushed everything up, and you look at wages, and even wages have increased as well, not to the extent that inflation has. You think about food and how much food's gone up by. But what would typically happen is that the tax bands would be increased. So whatever the tax band is, let's say, and I'll use an example here because there'll be people watching from other countries, but let's say that you were earning 40,000, right? Whatever that is, euros, dollars, pounds, whatever. And then inflation hits and everything starts rising. What would typically happen is they would increase the bands to account for that. But that hasn't really happened. So actually people are being pushed into higher bands and they're paying more taxes. And this sort of goes across a lot of the other economic indicators as well for the average person. So is it true that nothing has really gone up? No, that's not accurate. So that's the first point there. The second point is that about these tax rises that wouldn't take place. Actually, there are a lot of tax rises, and it is going to affect everyday people. Why? Because of the amount of quite wealthy people that are leaving the country. And you might say, well, I don't really care, Neil. There's a couple of articles people have written. They say, well, we don't care, these rich people are leaving. In some regards, that's true, because if they don't contribute to the economy, then yes, it won't really affect people. But some of these people, these rich people, own businesses, own companies in the UK, and they employ a lot of people. And some of them are talking about actually moving this business to another country. We're seeing a lot, and I'll show you some of the stats and where people are moving to. But if this happens, then that means an exodus of jobs as well. And the more money that's in a country, it's sort of, I know people don't like the trickle-down effect example, but the more money there is in a country, the greater the sort of spread of GDP per capita tends to be. So just a couple of points before we go into what I want to talk about here. So let's go to the first article. This is out of CNBC. Britain's ultra wealthy are threatening to exit en masse ahead of proposed tax changes. Well, actually, they're already leaving. They are leaving en masse at the moment. And I'll show you the stats here. We've got a lot of the migration data. So Monaco, Italy, Switzerland, Dubai, they're just a few of the destinations trying to lure away the UK's uber wealthy ahead of proposed changes to the country's divisive non-dom tax regime. So this one isn't as big of a point as some of the others that I want to mention here. But I just want to bring it to your attention because this is just come out from CNBC. Almost 2/3 of wealthy investors said they plan to leave the UK within 2 years or shortly if the Labour government moves ahead with plans to axe the colonial-era tax concession, while 67% said they would not have emigrated to Britain in the first place. And this is according to a new study from Oxford Economics. The finance minister, Rachel Reeves, has said that scrapping the programme could generate £2.6 billion over the course of the next government. Now, I was even going to say that's not going to work, but Oxford Economics have done this for me. Their research, which was produced earlier this month in collaboration with lobby group Foreign Investors for Britain, estimates the changes will instead cost taxpayers £1 billion by 2029 and 2030, which is more than I thought it would be. So that's good that they've done those figures. We are ringing out the alarm bell that this is a perilous time. If the government doesn't listen, they'll put at risk revenues for generations. Now, let's have a look then. This is the 2023 data of the UK losing a lot of their millionaires, a lot of wealthy people. Some, it doesn't make a lot of difference, but many of them will be business owners and entrepreneurs and investors, and that will affect the country's finances, especially if they pay tax in the country. So we saw 3,200 leave in 2023, and that's actually quite important. And the reason for that is that the UK is such a small country. You see how many left across such a tiny country. And then when I show you 2024, you'll see why this is so bad. This is the millionaire migration in 2024. 9,500. And they actually think it could be 12,000 now by the end of the year. It's that severe. The money is leaving the UK on a large scale. So where are people going to then? This is out of Euronews. These are the top inflow countries: the UAE, USA, Singapore, Canada, Australia, Italy, Switzerland, Greece, Portugal, and Japan. So these are your top 10 of where people are going. I thought this was an interesting article. This is Charlie Mullins. If you live in the UK, you'll know who he is. He set up was it Pimlico Plumbing, I think it's called. But either way, he's the richest plumber in the UK. And he's now said that he is leaving. He's even put his penthouse up for sale after paying 120 million in tax. He said that he is now off. He also revealed he doesn't want Sir Keir Starmer's socialist government to get their hands on any more of my hard-earned money, he said. He said over the next few months he'll be moving all of his assets out of the country, adding that he doesn't even have or doesn't want to have a bank account in his name in the UK. I can understand his sentiment on that one, actually. He said entrepreneurs and investors no longer want to live under a government that punishes self-improvement and seems to loathe aspiration and ambition. And that's really interesting that he said that, because in my course, which you can actually see on screen there, a little promo of it, I talk about that quite a lot. And I did on the wealth psychology course that I made as well. Went into a lot of detail on these things and talked about how there's certain countries that love small entrepreneurs and big entrepreneurs, and they will jump through hoops to help you to get there, especially if you are creating jobs, because when you create jobs, that increases the overall GDP of people, right? It helps with wages, it helps to give people work, etc. So it's interesting that a lot of other people are starting to talk about this. And I even saw it on a talk show earlier this morning that they were talking about how a lot of entrepreneurs are leaving because they just don't want to do entrepreneurship in the UK. And you remember that video I did a couple of years ago. In fact, it's about 3 years ago now, when I said why I was leaving the UK, because I had that meeting with my accountant. And I said, what on earth? How have I paid 72% in tax this year? Mind blown. And he explained that it was because of how the company was set up, and that I couldn't pass the VAT on to the customer because then I wouldn't be competitive with the chain. There was all these other things, and then I was paying business rates, which is a tax on your company if you have premises. I was paying corporation tax at 19-20% at the time. I was paying all the taxes on the employees. And then after I've paid this huge amount of tax, right, then when I took my own personal income tax, that was 45% rate, plus another 12% or whatever it was in national insurance. Then whenever I wanted to spend my money, I was taxed on it. So this is how it actually worked out. It was very, very, it's demotivating, I think is the correct word here. It is demotivating when you're the one taking all the risk and you're doing the 12, 14-hour days a lot of the time to build something up and employ a lot of people and to create a good service for society, and then you're sort of penalized for that quite heavily in some regards. But let's continue on with this then. He said, I've got nothing against paying reasonable amounts of tax. And again, I'd agree with this, reasonable amounts, but there's nothing reasonable about this government's plans to soak the rich, he says. He's going to divide his time between Spain and Dubai. Interestingly, I would say Spain is probably not the place to own a lot of assets, because within the EU, they have high levels of taxation as well. But Dubai is part of the UAE, so they have a 0% rule. You look into that a little bit more, but it's pretty much 0% in the UAE. He's also put his penthouse on the market for 12 million. Now, there's a lot of articles say good riddance to people. Yeah, 9,500 millionaires leaving the UK. Yeah, they're taking their companies with them and all their staff. Good riddance to them. Let them set themselves up in other countries, and people will just get better jobs and all this sort of stuff. I think people are not really understanding how this works and how the economy and how jobs actually work. UK debt hits 100% of GDP. This is the highest level since the 1960s, and the debt pile increases by 4.3% in the year to August. The scale of the challenge facing Rachel Reeves ahead of the autumn budget has been laid bare by a rise in Britain's national debt. This is the highest level now since the 1960s, and with a collapse in consumer confidence. So these figures were released by the ONS, that's the Office for National Statistics, and it showed the debt pile reached 100% of GDP in August. So not good at all. There's a lot of issues for the UK, a lot of issues indeed. And the difference between public sector spending and income was 13.7 billion, which was an increase of 3.3 billion on the same month last year. And this is the highest August deficit since records began in January of 1993. And what you're starting to see at the moment is this huge income for the government on capital gains taxes. Now, why? Because a lot of people are starting to sell their assets. Landlords are offloading properties. People are selling their assets quickly because they are expecting these rises to come in very, very soon. And the chancellors so far refused to rule out capital gains reform, so these could skyrocket as well. Another article out of Telegraph Money: how Labour could impose an exit tax on wealthy Britons fleeing the country. This would make it even worse if they put an exit tax on people who want to leave, because all that will happen is people will find a way around it and they'll leave really quickly now, and it's just going to make the whole situation worse. And we have even more stats out of the Telegraph here. Only China is set to lose more millionaires than the UK. Here it is here, but you think of the size of China compared to the UK. But also, this tends to happen when you have a country that develops quickly. As you generate millionaires in these countries like China and India, etc., they will move to other places. The Bank of England did hold rates, though. They've extended their bond reduction plan as well. So they've held them at 5%. And this is an interesting one. They're going to be doing some tightening then, what you know as QT. So they're going to be doing some tightening, and they want to destroy $133 billion worth of bonds over the next 12 months. That's quite a severe cut for the UK, I will say. The strategy behind that is quite interesting. We'll have to see if that works out. And then we have predictions for the UK interest rates then. So in November, we're expecting a 25 basis point reduction to 4.7, 4.38 in January 2025. So if you are waiting for a mortgage, etc., you can look at this chart here. It's called moneytothemasses.com, and you can just do a search for this. But this is what we are expecting the interest rates to do over the next 4 to 5 years here, back to around 3%. But what's interesting to me is all these Labour now, they're all coming out admitting that they've been taking all of these gifts, cash for clothes. Who needs, if you are earning the money these people are earning, why do they need people to buy them clothes? Can someone answer this question? She received almost £7,500 for clothing just since last year. Why? I mean, £7,500. What are they buying? I mean, many of you know, I own most of my wardrobe is all tailor-made clothing. It didn't cost me £7,500. So what on earth are they all? Some of them 10,000, 15,000. Now David Lamy, the defense secretary. I mean, he needs a suit and a shirt. I mean, I don't know what else he needs. Thousands and thousands in donations for clothing. It's dodgy, I'll tell you. It's really dodgy. And yet they've taken away all of these allowances and the winter fuel allowance for pensioners and all the other stuff. It's a weird one. I think it's a really strange one. But there we go. I'm glad I've got the UK update done for you here. And if you ever want more granular finance videos from me, I do a monthly macro video every month. It's in the Patreon private community. It's about an hour long or more. It's extremely detailed on finance and money and investments and things like that. I just did one on the different visas that you can get around the world. Just did a post on that yesterday, which has been very popular. I wasn't expecting that sort of level of people saying how much they liked that post. So that was quite an interesting one as well. But a quick summary, your two best ones, if you're not in the private membership, is Thailand DTV and Costa Rica are your lowest, absolute lowest cost digital visas at the moment, where you can get Thailand up to 5 years residency. You don't even pay taxes on it. So there's a couple of really good options out there at the moment. But apart from that, I think I'm going to wrap up there. Thank you so much for being online. Take care. God bless. And I will see you on Monday. Let's hope for some better news next week. Gosh, all this war constantly, non-stop is draining to keep covering it. So let's hope for some better news next week. All right. Bye for now.